here to discuss what I think is not only a very important book, but also a very relevant book in 2026. Um, Gandhi, in the end of nonviolence, sort of is set against partition. It examines Gandhi's peace mission in Noakhali, in Calcutta, in Bihar, and Delhi. And it asks a very fundamental question. It asks what happens when nonviolence confronts organized communal violence and fails. Um, and before I get into the heart of this book, I want to start, Manash, by first congratulating you for this book. And second, asking you to tell us where your interest in Gandhi began. It's a two-part question. And the second part of this is when you say the end of nonviolence, what do you mean by the word end?
Thank you, Narayani. Thanks to KLF for inviting me for this year's festival. And also thanks to Narayani for agreeing to moderate this session, in short notice. And thanks to all of you for joining us. Uh, so yes, my interest in Gandhi goes back to my student days, my university days in JNU, where we did Hind Swaraj, and that was my introduction, as is for most people, though some people of course start with the autobiography. That's where I started, and but that book, was uh, a little, if I may, peculiar to me. I wouldn't say that I really took to that book as much as maybe I took to Nehru's Discovery of India. Gandhi was not really speaking to me that much in that book. But later, when I read Ashish Nandi's Intimate Enemy, that's where I think I got hit, and I could realize that Gandhi was speaking in different registers, like psychology, political psychology, history, what Nandi calls mythography, and also politics, and also politics which includes politics of gender. So these are the stuff that I couldn't discover in Hind Swaraj, but I discovered in Nandi's reading of Gandhi, and I thought a lot is going on in Gandhi's case. So I have been interested since then, and I did my PhD on Nehru and Gandhi, comparing them. But that was a different kind of study, typical academic kind of study where you go into each thought and idea and stuff like that. But later, of course, when I did this paper in 2007 in a seminar in JNU on Gandhi in Noakhali, I somehow don't remember what led me to pick this topic, and how come I got into reading Nirmal Kumar Bose's diaries and Manu's diaries. But they, I think, had a deep impact on me. Also, maybe partly because my father had come from East Bengal, and there are a lot of stories of partition I grew up with. So all of that must have just come together. And also, for instance, I came to realize in 2007 that the place that we had shifted to from Assam, a place called Shodhpur, it's on 24 Parganas north of Kolkata. So so there is actually a Gandhi ashram there, which I didn't know since I was staying there since 95. And that was the main ashram where Gandhi would stay before going to Noakhali or anywhere else. That was his like headquarters in Kolkata. So he would travel from there. Though later, of course, during the riots, he stayed at Haidari Mansion and all that. But Shodhpur was like a center. Uh, so all that intrigued me, and so then after finishing my Nehru, when I wanted to do on Gandhi, I uh, thought of the impact that that context had on me, and I wanted to work on partition and Gandhi and what he was doing there, because I thought that was the most difficult and disturbing moment in Gandhi's career, which even some of our well-known Gandhians, told me when I spoke to them about this work that I'm doing, they were very excited about it. They said that this is Gandhi's most, most exciting, his highest point, highest mark. And it was intriguing that even though it does come up in biographies, in certain sections or chapters by biographers, but a whole book on just this was not available so far. So I was intrigued by that, but then I think I learned as I worked on it, like what was really difficult about it. So that was good for me to really explore in this book. um, to your very pertinent question about the subtitle and the word end, because I remember, when I shared the surname, sorry, the subtitle of the book with some people. Like one person is a very senior historian, one person is a painter, and a few others, and they were almost disturbed by the word end there, and they wondered what was I trying to convey by saying end. And I was a bit puzzled by their disturbance, because I thought it was sort of natural to imagine that if somebody is writing on partition, that non-violence had indeed come to an end. So, what's the anxiety in sort of acknowledging that? And I was also coming actually, and this subtitle also happened uh, uh, because of what Gandhi was saying. Gandhi was also saying that non-violence had come to an end, and in various ways he kept saying the same thing, that he cannot see non-violence anywhere. It did not exist around him. So it was that feeling. So I thought this will be the best paradox to see, that how do you experiment with non-violence when it does not exist? And that radical paradox, which I think Gandhi sort of addresses and meets that challenge head on, that's what I wanted to show in the book. So that's where the title comes from.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And just for readers who aren't familiar as yet with your book, the lens that you've used is particularly interesting. You've talked about the difference between pathetic and factual history, and you warned against the dangers of going down the path of pathetic history, which is sentimentalizing history in a large extent. Why did you feel that was the lens that you wanted to use when you were writing this particular book?
Thanks for that question. I think that's also a very pertinent question, something that none of the 7, 8 reviews that have come have actually touched upon this. Because I took some time to write that section on pathetic and factual, precisely because I thought it had a significance in the way I'm approaching the topic in the book. So basically, I must have thought at some point that because this book is so much about partition, about killings, about murders, about death and grief and all that, there is obviously a tendency, and very easy tendency in India, as we often see, to sentimentalize grief, to sentimentalize death, and then not just to sentimentalize. First, you sentimentalize and then use it. Use it then for other very non-sentimental, purposes. Where you want to sort of, play this kind of victimization versus blame game sort of thing, which is very rampant, particularly these days. So I wanted to tell my readers that, look, I am not in either of the boats. I am not in favor of doing a very cold blooded, logical, rationalist reading of that history, which I think will be uh, doing a great disservice to this huge pile of grief and violence that period has seen. But I also wanted to be very clear and be wary, and wanted the reader also to be very wary of not sentimentalizing those episodes of killings and murders, because this is, after all, a history of our um country and of our modern period, which needs to be read with sensitivity, with feeling, and yet with a certain kind of, dispassionate interest in what really happened. Because what sentimentality does and what sentimentalism tends to do is to put a lid over the subject. So for me, I have always maintained this, that the problem with sentimentality is, as opposed to feelings and even emotions, that sentiments try to, really, you know, uh, sort of narrow, not just narrow down the lens, but it also somewhere throttles the subject. So even the subject that you are particularly maybe, speaking for, your sentimental subject, you would be actually throttling that subject as well. You won't allow that subject to speak. It is your sentimentalizing of the subject. So we do it in our, intimate relations. We do it in our familial relations, all sorts of relations. When we tend to sentimentalize our relationship with others, we are actually not allowing them to speak. And there is something even patriarchal about it, which I don't want to go into right now, but I find a whole lot of problem with sentimentalizing. So because of these issues, I wanted to be very clear that I am not riding either the rationalist, scientific, objective boat of reading this episode, nor am I sentimentalizing the emotions involved in this episode. Yeah.
Now, I want to stay with the structure a bit because, this book is set against two very bloody years of Indian history, 46 to 48. Why did you choose this specific time period? Because this is not the first time that Gandhi has been aghast that non-violence has led to widespread communal violence. I think the first time that happened was at Chori Chora. So why did you choose 1946 to 1948?
Yes. For one, I think, having read about all the major events that Gandhi was involved in and he was part of, uh, I would say, to repeat what I did a little earlier, that I found this moment the most challenging. It is, of course, true that when the Chauri Chora happened, that was also a violent episode, which Gandhi uh, had to rush to in order to quell and then talk to authorities and make peace between the peasants and the officials. And there also, in fact, what we learned much later, to Gandhi's credit, and that he had such a, deep and anthropological mind, that he also actually ensured that somebody took testimonies of the peasants, and today we have them. They are coming out in volumes. So that was a great, kind of insight that Gandhi had during the time, that we must. And the interesting thing is, he was not that kind of, researcher, and I mean that kind of a researcher's mind he had, that he would say that, sampling people. So like if 3000 people have suffered or they are part of the movement, he told his associates to interview all 3000 people. So all of them are there. It's the testimony of all of them. So it's not like, pick 100 or pick 200. He did not want to leave out anybody. So that's the sort of scale. So Gandhi always, I think, had this epic scale of thinking and imagination and grappling with anything. And that has, I think, left us with so much volumes of work, not only his own work, his own writings, but even movements that he has been associated with. There's so much there that he's also ensured that is left to us to study. So there's a great historian, come anthropologist, come researcher in Gandhi. It's working at the same time, even as he is the political activist that he was. So when it comes to Noakhali as well, the story goes that, and I'll come to the broader question after this anecdote. It that when in this particular village, in this village of East Bengal, in Noakhali, there was a woman, and very old widow, who came to meet Gandhi with a long bone in her hand, and that was the bone of her husband, and he wanted to show it to him. And that must have shocked Gandhi so much that he immediately told Nirmal Kumar Basu to take testimonies. And so today we have, this was actually written in Bengali, by Bose, but now we are having a translation of it coming out soon, hopefully by Mr. Ramaswamy, who lives in Kolkata and does translations of Bengali to English. So, because of that prompt, that we have a translation of Noakhali testimonies as well. Though I really don't know what went missing in Bihar, because we would have loved to have this testimony in Bihar and in other places as well. But at least we have it for Noakhali, and I've used it briefly in my book, because again, I was not trying to sort of excite feelings by going into the details of these testimonies, but use them to sort of show what sort of violence really took place and how people met with with this violence. So the interesting thing for me was that it was actually 46, 47 when for the first time ever that Gandhi is actually accepting defeat, and he's saying that, look, I feel that I think my struggle has come to an end, I have failed. So there's a deep sense of failure, but even then he refused to be completely defeated. He said that I am not defeated yet. So I remember when there is this uh, mention of him, there's this description which also for the first time I think it came out in some report in the Hindu, which is part of his collected works, which is where I found it, that there was this ruined, burnt building where this Hindu correspondent, when he had gone to Noakhali to interview Gandhi, that's where he found Gandhi sitting. So Gandhi he found sitting actually inside this building that was burned and broken, and that image itself made me feel that here was Gandhi trying to make a point that, look, everything, most of it is lost, but nothing is, everything is not lost yet. There is something, there's a spark of life still remaining here in this place. So I thought that sort of a hopefulness, that sort of an audacity, that sort of a courage, and such a silent sort of courage, I thought that was exemplary. So this very striking sort of encounter between violence and non-violence is perhaps most starkly experienced when you read the material of 46, 47, and also Gandhi was old enough, his body was not really keeping up to the spirit that he had earlier. So a lot of things were crumbling. India's body politic was crumbling, Gandhi's physical body was crumbling, Hindu-Muslim relations were crumbling. The Muslim League Congress dialogues was crumbling. The world was crumbling as at large. So, in the middle of this very, very, disturbing, poignant, violent moment of the 20th century, when Gandhi actually has this, deep audacity to actually still not give up, despite acknowledging that that his experiment has failed. So I thought, for me, philosophically speaking or historically speaking, the best moment for me to look at a man's life is when he is apparently failing and yet making his bravest gesture against that failure. So for me, failure is a much more, is a deeper philosophical, moment to think about. It has more scope for us to think about than moments where Gandhi is at the top of his game and he's leading a movement and it's kind of successful. So for me, actually, these moments of failure are, I think, historically, politically more important for us, because we are constantly facing failure. We all want certain good things to happen, to the life of our nations, to the life of this world, but we are constantly failing. So I want to really, go deep into the nature of this failure, the political nature, what actually makes it possible, because this is not merely obviously philosophical. There's a huge, there's a political motivation, there are a lot of political calculations, pragmatism, which is behind what's going on. And in the middle of this, to actually look at Gandhi, who is actually non pragmatic, non-logical, non-calculative. Because for me, as I read Gandhi, he is this, this non-rational, non-pragmatic leader par excellence, because he has this very different, effusive, sort of approach towards how to solve the problem of the human encounter.
Yeah, and since we're on the subject of, the human experience with failing, your book also touches upon and critiques the limitations of ahimsa as a political strategy. And the fact that Gandhi is using non-violence at a time when the world is already marked with so many different kinds of violence. You have world wars going on. The Second World War has just culminated. Um, you have apartheid, you have many different kinds of violence already marking the world at this point in the 20th century. Um, Tell us a bit about where you think ahimsa as a strategy stops working, if at all.
Yeah, so I would say this, beginning with, let's say, I mean, I was immediately reminded of, say, Hannah Arendt and her very popular critique that Gandhi's experiment would have failed in Stalin's Russia and Hitler's Germany. And I have said in this book very categorically that I find it a very weak sort of a critique, because you take the most extreme, the most barbaric form of modern political power and then pit non-violence against that. So that, I think, is not being fair to Gandhi at all. And though it is true that the British regime did give that sort of space, colonial space, nevertheless, but that space where Gandhi could actually work and carry on this movement. Though it was not that Gandhi wasn't jailed and he wasn't warned and all that of course happened, but still Gandhi got enough space. But then it is also true that Gandhi worked, and Gandhi was smart enough to know that there is a logic of this kind of colonial rule that was in place in a country like India, and he wanted to work both with and against that logic. So sometimes, so there are criticisms of Gandhi. Oh, sometimes he would collaborate with the British and this and that. He would listen to them, and he would be a law-abiding citizen. No, but so what? The point is that he wanted to get his thing, and it didn't matter to him how he would get it, as long as it was not, sort of jeopardizing the larger, goal and ambition of the freedom movement. So that's one thing. So Gandhi's ahimsa, in fact, is, I think, best read as a principle when you actually pit him and pit this whole movement against what he was up to and what he was actually doing. So it wasn't that. And also, some people have the tendency to read it as an absolute thing, that non-violence is absolute. So this kind of scholarship happened for a while, like till late 90s, I think, even early 2000. People took Gandhi's non-violence for granted, like what he was saying. But it was only, after the 2000, then real critical scholarship on Gandhi was beginning to emerge. Some of that scholarship also came from uh, Ambedkarites who were looking at the question of violence in Gandhi's approach to caste, for instance. So various studies, came coming up on Gandhi's, violence, and you have Ajay Skaria, you have many scholars, writing on this aspect of the violence in non-violence. But I would say that, to say that there is violence in non-violence, for me, is also a commonsensical thing. Like, it is obviously there. It was only hagiographers who missed it, maybe, but it is very much there. But the point, I think, the more interesting point is then to see, that what is this ahimsa grappling with? Like, what is the himsa in the ahimsa, or what is the himsa outside the sort of, the ethos of that encounter, which is supposed to be non-violent? What is it? What is happening there? And the interesting thing about Gandhi is that, though, a lot of time is spent, uh, often by scholars, into getting into how to, like, oneself become the subject of ahimsa. Now, that part is, of course, there, but this whole self training, self preparation towards becoming a non-violent subject, that is pretty much there in Gandhi. A lot of interesting things about, from food to, all sorts of things about how to make oneself non-violent. But for me, the more political aspect of non-violence and ahimsa is where Gandhi is talking about the encounter, that there is an encounter between you and another person, and the possibility of violence is constantly present. Now, what do you really do there? And which is also to say that the other person you're facing, the person who's facing you, that person may not believe in the principles of nonviolence that you have. So how do you deal with that situation? That's a very real situation. So when he was, traveling by foot through the villages of Noakhali in 46, 47, there were times when, people warned Gandhi against going to a particular place or meeting some particular person, but Gandhi was actually constantly, breaking those barriers. And so, say there was a mullah in a particular village, so Gandhi would insist on staying for the night in the mullah's house in that village. Or he would, for one night, he stayed with a boatman in another village. So Gandhi was, I think, constantly trying to, you know, the ahimsa that was put in practice is much more interesting than the theoretical ahimsa that, many scholars are often, involved with. That, this is ahimsa, that is ahimsa. It is as if, to get it right. But the whole challenge, I think, is not to get it exactly right. There is nothing scientific about it, as much as it is there in that risk taking right in the street, right out in the open. So ahimsa is actually something practiced in the open. So it is in the open that one should read Gandhi. What is he doing there in that face to face encounter with people, with both? So he was meeting perpetrators, he was meeting victims in Noakhali, in Bihar, in Calcutta, in Delhi. And sometimes he even used some harsh language even with the victims, and he was doing it deliberately because he saw them so demoralized that he wanted to raise their spirits and talk to them in a certain way. And even with perpetrators, he hardly lost his cool, and he would tell them things that they can reflect upon and ponder upon. So for me, so ahimsa in that sense is not something you may find in international politics and that kind of thing. But I think if one goes into the very, the detailed texture of Gandhi's movement, that it is ultimately, its strength lies in people and the people to people thing. That's where I think, and why I think Gandhi is still relevant today, though I don't like the word relevance at all. But still, I think that's where his importance sort of lies. That it's ultimately a people thing. It's ultimately what is between us. It's between people facing each other wherever, so that universality, which is breaking the sort of hierarchies and power questions which are almost like commonsensical in our political vocabulary. So Gandhi has infused this term ahimsa and even words like satyagraha to sort of, make us deflect, like deflect this whole thing about power and make us see even power differently. So I think these are, many of the very interesting moves that he's doing through these terms.
No, and your book also mentions, when with Gandhi's walking becomes a major moment in India's political history, right? So it was also a very clear political strategy of some sort. But I want to move on to Gandhi and religion at this point, because Gandhi says in your book, and I quote, "Those who say that religion has nothing to do with politics do not know what religion means." Stop quote. So I want you to tell us more about the link between what link Gandhi makes between politics and religion. And I do want to refer to a podcast that you did called Navigating India, where you brought out a very interesting sort of binary that you've used, where you said that Gandhi was not intending to politicalize religion, he was political. Sorry, he was politicalizing religion rather than politicizing religion. And I thought that was a very interesting binary. I've not heard it before, so I'd like you to sort of tell us more about that.
Cool. So politicalize, this word, I think I've used it as a neologism in the book, and I wanted to make this distinction, first of all, of course, between politicizing and politicalizing, and also make this distinction because most people seem to have this argument, which has again become very commonsensical since long, that Gandhi brought religion into politics. So so secular minded people, uh, thinkers, scholars, intellectuals, they have this problem with the religious aspect of Gandhi. Now, I think this is the time when perhaps it is, more than ever, uh, you know, easier maybe to understand exactly what he was doing and to maybe appreciate some of the stuff that he was thinking maybe about how to handle the question of religion. So, so when he made that statement, which you quoted, that people who think that this has nothing to do with that, they don't know what religion means. So, if you go into the details of what Gandhi is actually doing and practicing, and not just go by this statement, but actually understand or relate this statement to his practice, which I think we always need to do when it comes to Gandhi. We always need to sort of contrast or compare or connect what Gandhi is doing in terms of, and also what he's saying. Here it seems that Gandhi is not saying that he is going to make politics religious. That's not what he's saying. He knows that, and this he knew even while writing the Hind Swaraj. So as early as the 1900s, he knew that it is impossible to for keeping religion out of politics, because for him one of the fundamental aspects of modernity is that religion is modern, and modern religion, which is different from pre-modern religion, this is involved in what we call politics and modern politics. So you don't have to make it has already been made. So the relation between politics and religion is already there. It has happened. So what do you do with it? So the typical secular response would be, oh, keep it out, make it private. I mean, that's the liberal sort of understanding, church and state and stuff like that. Gandhi is actually not a statist thinker. He's a community thinker, he's a people's thinker, and he is thinking of how do you tackle this problem or this question of religion in civil society, political society, in society as such. So there he feels that the and he could see that there are different meanings that are being put to religion, that religion and the meaning of religion is up for grabs. So like anybody can claim anything to be religious, exactly what we are seeing today. And I think Gandhi knew that danger exactly during that time. So what he said is that, look, we cannot keep the two separate, but what we should actually do is go into religion itself and see what can we do to religion in its encounter with politics. So for instance, there are certain ethical and moral questions that religions raise. He did not throw them out. He did not think they are, not important. So he thought religion can have important, interesting things to say, and people relate to them very strongly. So why not politicalize them, as in why not bring these terms into the discourse of politics and see what happens. So politicizing would mean, what we call, let's say, communal politics. That is politicizing religion. That is using. So that's instrumentalizing religion. You use religion as an instrument for politics. Gandhi was far away from that kind of thinking. He was like, he took, and because he took religion seriously, and he did not think of religion as something to be imposed on people, or on the principles of the state or anything like that. He thought religion was something which is, because it is so intimately linked to our lives and our moral values and ethics and stuff. So he wanted to really get into that, and through that, then he also sort of started in a way, treating religion or his own movement vis-a-vis religion as a sort of new sort of a machine. He realized that religion was a new machine, and he wanted to sort of bring in his own ideas into it. And this also, you know makes me remember, and I would like to just say this in passing, that, so for instance, there are some ideas in Gandhi, say this whole idea about finding, looking for God face to face. So that is again something that people rightly, associate with a certain kind of Judeo-Christian tradition. And the moment you say that today, particularly, some people can just jump and say, "Oh, but this has nothing to do with Hinduism." No, but so what? Gandhi was not, did not have this idea that, at least in modern times, the times that he lived in, that to be religious meant that you have to just go by the thinking of just one religious tradition. That he really believed that even religious thinking was something so broad and open that we had to sort of bring in the values of different sort of traditional systems in order to grapple with this world, because modernity was not Hindu. There is nothing particularly Hindu about being modern. Modernity came from the West. We cannot deny that. So he also became as universal as the very reality and concept of modernity is. And so, yeah.
And it's interesting to me because, I mean, obviously he's believing this. How is it being interpreted by people who are interacting and engaging with Gandhi? Because you have Ambedkar saying, and I'm quoting, in order to protect Hindu Muslim unity, Gandhi did not mind the murders of a few Hindus. And then there's also this occasion of this reporter, since we're talking about people from across the spectrum. There's this reporter who asks him, why shouldn't you be called Muhammad Gandhi? So, what are the connotations behind how people across the board are receiving what Gandhi is trying to preach or practice?
Yes, this is also very important, and also it has a obvious connection with our times. Uh, if I can start with the Muhammad Gandhi thing, this is something, in fact, I heard from my father. My father, who was not particularly a fan of either Nehru or Gandhi, and would always say harsh things the moment their names came up. The moment he would hear their names, he would say something. So I would understand that he is coming from a partition sufferer's, feelings and perspectives. But a lot of the information and knowledge that he had about Gandhi was also colored by, the various sort of agencies and people that he must have interacted with and read and all of that. So there is a different literature also that he was coming from when he was, talking in this manner. And um and so I've heard these sort of stuff which goes around today as well, about Gandhi being partial to Muslims. And so this keeps coming up, and it's interesting to see that it came up even then, during Gandhi's time, and even before 47. So, one of the things is that, where does I mean, what is this sort of thinking? What does this kind of language uh, mean to suggest? The first thing we should get into is the language. What is this language about calling, somebody in these terms? So the problem is that, if somebody, so in fact, you know, when a situation and people's mindsets are communalized, and when there are actually communal violence happening, so there is also a real ground, let's say, behind maybe people turning communal. There, I noticed, and you would notice that you would have, if if you have gone through this literature, that uh, impartiality itself is partial, because it is expected that if you belong to a certain religion, and if it is in conflict with another religion, the only option available to you, the only moral option, political option available to you, is that you have to stand by your religion, and you have to speak badly of the other because you are in conflict. Now, Gandhi, unfortunately for such thinking, did not believe that sort of thing. For him, he was somebody, even though he called himself a Hindu and a Sanatani Hindu, his his ethical thinking was that if there is a conflict, as a good Hindu, he should not be taking sides, but actually come in between the two sides, and that's what he has done. And so the point is that in this sort of situation, when you are impartial and you are actually being sensitive to both the sides and both communities, that's when the question of partiality comes into being, because there is no room. So this is a strange sort of thinking where which clubs a conflict purely on the terms of identity. So it is that, that as if there is a conflict, it is impossible to get out of your skin, to get out of your identity and become anything else. But then Gandhi's religiosity was not skin deep. It wasn't part of his identity. It was about something else. For him, it does not mean anything to be Hindu if he cannot reach out as a Hindu to the Muslim. So that was his thinking of being a religious person. So that is a very, very absolutely different sort of register, a different sort of approach to this whole problem. And to say what Ambedkar said during that time, I think he was not reading, for me, I mean, that's what I said in the book, that he wasn't, I think, reading the whole literature around what was happening when, let's say, Swami Shraddhanand was murdered, and all of those events were happening after the Mapila riots in Kerala. During that period, Gandhi was actually giving out, he has given out very strong press public statements on these murders. He's really critiqued the murder in very strong terms, but probably Ambedkar missed them, or he was reading some other kind of literature, which was actually attacking Gandhi. And but Gandhi actually stood very strongly about this. But yes, but he did not step, take two steps towards aggravating it and then making it into a language of animosity. Because the whole point for Gandhi was that yes, there is conflict, but even in conflict, the least we can do is not to become a victim of animosity, because that will make the conflict even worse. So he was, I think he was guided by very, very simple actually principles of human ethics and things like that, which to us seem to be strange, or as if Gandhi had some interest in doing all that. But what interest can Gandhi do for a man who was attacked from every side? Gandhi was actually, calling for this sort of criticisms from every side, and he received it during his time. He received it after his time. He's still receiving it. So, for a man who has actually received so much of critique and vicious attack, I don't think he was doing it out of any self-interest at all. In fact, the opposite.
Since we're touching on the subject of ethics, Jinnah said, and I want you to lay the context for why Jinnah said this, since your book deals with the events around Direct Action Day and following. He says, I am not going to discuss ethics. Now, apart from laying the context for us around this statement, can you also tell us whether you feel this was the point at which ethics sort of left the room, as it were, when it comes to the question of partition, when it comes to the question of moving towards the path that India was moving?
Yeah, this is an important question also, because this was a sort of decision that one had to make, at least I had to make. So I want to make it very clear, at least that my reading of partition, uh, and once I went through all the literature, was that every group, religious group, ideological group, everybody was in some way or the other involved in the violence of partition. But yet somewhere the sort of original blame for the breakout of violence has to be somewhere, at least in my reading, be given to what the Muslim League really did in 46, and what actually Jinnah came up with. So that direct action day plan by Jinnah, for me, is absolutely crucial and fundamental for us to learn why and how the whole fallout of partition, this whole violence, overcame all these societies. Because direct action day for me is that singular, that singular call, singular aspect, which actually led to this whole thing. And even though, like I said, others became involved in it as well, there were violence, communal violence going on even before that. But particularly, if you ask me about partition violence, Jinnah and the Muslim League has to take a very, very primary sort of blame, for thinking about this whole thing, and also particularly direct action day. I mean, maybe, somebody can ask the question that could we have, could Jinnah had, achieved partition without, say, declaring something like the direct action day. And I remember, Jinnah's very kind biographers like Aisha Jalal, whom unfortunately, people in India also have, and scholars, have followed since the decades. She, really skirts the real question, and she reads Jinnah in a very, very apolitical sort of manner, because like her reaction to this comment, and this comment about, like, somebody mentioned gun and all of that, they said, oh, this is just a metaphor. But like I said, that sometimes metaphors are indications, metaphors are, can be very real when you are giving a sort of, program, a political program about what you are going to do. And like my reading of the material of partition, let's say in Bengal, shows that, for instance, in Noakhali, it's also there in Bengal, sorry, in Kolkata in particular, but more so in Noakhali, if you read the details of the organization behind the genocide that happened in Noakhali. So, so these were like planned. The whole violence was planned weeks before it actually happened. People were stationed at the, at the shores, where the boats would go and come, and they used to, sort of take a note, and they would watch over, who is coming, who is going. They wanted to cordon off that whole sort of district, that whole village, so that they could unleash this violence. So it is not, so it is not that direct action day was innocent about, or didn't know about what was going to come. There is a deep consequential link, I would say, to what Jinnah declared and what happened. I won't say it was inconsequentially in the sense that, that he couldn't know that what consequences will happen. No, he pretty much knew. And this again brings us to the question of political instrumentality and political ethics, because when Jinnah says that don't talk about ethics, I would maybe provocatively read that Jinnah was so bothered about ethics, partly also because of Gandhi's presence. He knows that, there is this ethical question that Gandhi is bound to raise, is constantly raising. And he being, a man of law and purely of law, who actually understood also politics through that lens of the law, something which is purely negotiable and purely negotiable. And that's why he did not like Gandhi joining the freedom movement in the first place. I mean, Jinnah left the Congress also partly because he did not like Gandhi turning the freedom movement into a mass movement, bringing the movement to the streets. Whereas Jinnah wanted to fight the freedom movement in the law courts. But so that itself was his first problem with him, and he remained sort of good lawyer till the end, and he fought his case for Pakistan pretty brilliantly, though you know he had to really face this question. So for him to actually say that ethics has to go out of this room, he is finally actually making this point that look, it is impossible to achieve partition without violence. So he wanted to sort of instill almost that logic into the movement, the Pakistan movement, to kind of say that that this is it. So it was, in a larger sense, I guess, making violence acceptable, making the logic of violence acceptable, inevitable, that there is no other way than do this, because a population was involved and all sorts of things were why we had, for instance, this whole this forced conversion thing that happened in Noakhali was about population, and which also was logically linked to the argument of Pakistan. So all these were behind this sort of larger frame of violence that Jinnah was sort of posing.
There's so much more rich material to be engaged with in your book, but I would like to open this up to the audience. We have just about 6.5 minutes for any questions that you guys might have.
Would you say that we can still use Gandhi's tool of nonviolence in global organizations and national politics, or has it become a silent historical memory? And would you say that Nehru was a bit idealistic with his expectations and background? Thank you.
Uh, Nehru was indeed idealistic, and I guess, I hope there's nothing wrong in being so. And idealism is not something that you are always able to implement, but it is a good sort of thing to have in you. It is only, I think, if when you're idealistic, that you can maybe see things beyond the narrow calculations of politics, because the political world is not idealistic, and Nehru knows it very well. But even then, to sort of hold on to certain idealisms in your mind may often, help you to take decisions and make policies, or whatever, or to meet a challenge, a political challenge with some sort of idealism in your head, because then you don't completely lose yourself, to the narrow calculations of real politics. And for Gandhi's question, I would, say that yes, that silent thing that you said, which is there, I mean, that is there. And I think, that Gandhi is actually, I like your use of the word silence. I mean, I would agree. I would say that Gandhi's name may not automatically come up, or or his method may not or need not be exactly followed in political movements today, but somewhere that silence, that that Gandhi is still present there in his silence, that Gandhi has sort of put a certain idea in place which is so strong that it actually is part of our silence. Yeah, very much. And it is a very powerful silence, I think, and it's a silence we cannot get out of. It keeps speaking through us, like that whistle that was in that Charlie Chaplin had in that thing had gulped down, and then it was that whistle was coming up whenever he would be. So it is something like that. Gandhi is that moral whistle that keeps playing whenever we least expect it.
Manash, well spoken. Really enjoyed the session. I just have see the Gandhi and Nehru, that Gandhi took religion seriously, and you can always say Nehru took science seriously. So in the early modern era, where there was a lot of interaction between these two, since the advent of enlightenment, so there was a philosopher of science, Stephen Kroger, who made a very interesting observation that in this interaction, as always happened, the science took very tacitly, the doctrinal nature from the religion, and religion the rational nature from the science. The religion started becoming rationalized, and science becoming axiomatic and doctrinalized. I would say both has indirectly led to violence in the end. So I'm very skeptical of this religion and rationalizing the religion. So as you rightly said, it's not about sentimentalizing. So even thinking of national socialism, people think that, oh, sentimentalizing the nationalism. No, there is a lot of rationality behind it, as Hannah Arendt said. So I just want to comment on it.
Yeah, that is very true. So some way what you are saying, and which is very true. Like in these sort of movements, like national socialism leading to fascism, we do find a connection, a deep, disturbing, but even logical connection between sentimentality on the one hand and a certain rational logic on the other, and both can come together. And I think this is also the reason why we often find, for instance, that a certain idea of, you know, doctrinaire communism, can also come very close to a certain kind of European fascism as well, because it is of course true that ideologically maybe Stalin and Hitler were far apart, but some of the nature of sort of state violence and understanding of the relation between state and people, and so many other things, and the way a certain bulldozing happened of people and lives during the time. There's clearly, on the one hand, you're sentimental about ideology, but you are very good with using it rationally over people. So where you are like doing a disservice to even sentimentality for all its with all its problems, and rationality with all it, like you are doing the worst of, you are doing the worst of both. And I think that marriages has been the most devastating, for sure, in the 20th century, for sure. Thanks, Babu.
Thank you. I think we're all out of time at this point. But thank you, Manash. This was a wonderful conversation. Thank you all for listening in. Thank you.